Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ravnica Allegiance spoilers. And official spoiler season is finally here, which means we actually have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Not a ton of cards and numbers, but some cycles, some mythics, some really sweet stuff going on. So that means we should probably jump right into it and start talking about these sweet new Ravnica Allegiance cards, starting off with our first mythic, and only mythic of the day, the creature type. Jellyfish Hydra Beast, gotta be one of the sweetest, most Simic creature types that we've ever had in the history of Magic. Jellyfish Hydra Beast is just so cool. So this card, I'm not really sure how good it is. If you actually think about how this works out and break down the numbers, so let's say you cast this for 4 mana, you're going to get a 2/2 flyer, you're going to draw a card and gain a life, which kind of makes it a Muse Drake, which is not a card anyone's breaking out in Constructed. If you cast it for 6 mana, you're going to draw 2 cards and gain 2 life, and you get a 4/4, which makes it basically a strictly upgraded Phyrexian Gargantua. Like, it has flying, you're gaining life instead of losing life. And then if you get up to the high mana cost, 8 mana, 10 mana, then you're drawing a lot of cards and gaining a lot of life, and you got like a Tishana or something along those lines. The thing is, it's not especially efficient at any point on the curve. If you look at the flyers we have in Standard, for 5 mana with Lyra or Doom Whisperer, you're getting a 5/5, a 6/6 with upside. At that mana cost with Hydroid Krasis, you're getting like a 3/3, which I guess that's okay. I mean, it's not exciting. You are drawing a card. Even like Crackling Drake is like a 10/4 flyer a lot of the time for 4 mana. At 4 mana, Hydroid Krasis is only a 2/2, so the stats are not really all that exciting, which makes me think that this might be mostly a commander card. I mean, I guess if you can go really big mana-wise and play a ramp deck with like Lantern Warehouse and Druid of the Cowl and Elfim Druid, and you're consistently like chaining these together, it's not legendary. Chaining them together for like 8 mana, 10 mana, it's probably going to win you the game. With the card advantage, with the big flyers, like that is a legit top end of a ramp deck, and the card draw is really nice, but at most points on the curve, especially anything below like 7, 8, 9, 10 mana, there's just a pretty inefficient option compared to the rest of the stuff we have in the format. Although I will say, it does work really well with the theme of Simic in Standard, where +1/+1 counters, you're triggering your Simic Ascendancy to get some counters on it. It can flip a Hadana's Climb all by itself for 5 mana, and then doubling up the power and toughness is a pretty legit scary way to kill someone in the air. And compared to the other flyers we were talking about, there is an upside. One of the downsides of cards like Lyra, and even Doom Whisper to some extent, is you play them, they get Chupacabra or whatever, and you don't get any value, at least with Hydroid Krasis, which does die to a lot. Chupacabra, Veraska, Vivian Reed, at least you're going to hopefully be drawing a card or two and getting some immediate value, which help reduces the downside of just getting blown out immediately by a removal spell, like sometimes happens with Lyra Dawnbringer in specific. So overall, I think Hydroid Krasis, it's a really sweet card. I really like this card. I think it's going to be awesome in Commander. Maybe it can show up in a ramp deck in Standard, but when you really look behind the numbers, it's not particularly efficient at any point on the curve, and more disappointingly, it triggers when it is cast, which this is both an upside and a downside. Downside is you can't Panharmonic on it, which always is important to me. The upside is when you cast a spell, you are going to get to draw those cards and gain that life, even if it ends up getting countered and not hitting the battlefield. So that is an upside. You're at least casting it as like an uncounterable, inefficient, but uncounterable card draw spell. So I think Hydroid Krasis, the flavor is great, the card is sweet, it can be powerful if you have a ton of mana, but I'm a little bit worried that it's just not efficient enough at 4 mana, 5 mana, 6 mana, until you get up to like 8+ mana to really make an impact on the Standard format, outside of maybe some sort sort of like crazy Simic ramp deck, or maybe we see enough +1/+1 counter support that this card is just absurd. If we have like doubling season or something, then all bets are off, and you never know what's going to happen with the +1/+1 counter theme. So, super sweet card. Creature type is awesome. We'll have to wait and see as far as standard play, but definitely going to show up in a lot of commander decks. Next up, we have Deputy of Detention, which it's basically Detention Sphere. It is Detention Sphere on a 1/3 body, same mana cost. It does have a bit of an upside where it only is going to exile your opponent's stuff. If you've never played with Detention Sphere, if you happen to have the same permanent that you're exiling on your side of the battlefield, it does exile your copy as well, which is a little bit weird sometimes. Like, you get your opponent's Jace and lose your Jace, for example. So Deputy of Detention does fix that downside, and it's a potentially powerful effect. We have seen similar cards before, but not exactly like this. So the most obvious home for Deputy of Detention in Standard is this card is a great hoser for Selesnya and for token decks. Your opponent March in the Multitudes, you Deputy of Detention, you exile all the tokens, get rid of it forever, and since tokens disappear when they're exiled, you don't even have to worry about your opponent killing your Deputy of Detention and getting it back. Same with tokens from like Tristani or Saproling Migration. So, worst case, Deputy of Detention is a great sideboard option for token matchups. It also has some historical context of being playable on its own. Like, in the past, Fiend Hunter was pretty much a standard staple. Banisher Priest also saw play in Standard, and Deputy of Detention has a big upside compared to either of these cards, which is it gets any non-land permanent your opponent controls. When Fiend Hunter, Banisher Priest only get creatures, and I actually did a search for this and tried to figure it out, and I'm pretty sure Deputy of Detention is the only creature that is worded this way, where it hits any non-land permanent. So this means in Standard you can snipe a Planeswalker, you can snipe a Immortal Sun, you can snipe a Search for Azcanta, which is pretty nice. The downside of Deputy of Detention is, compared especially to Detention Sphere, which is an enchantment, being creature means it dies a lot, and it dies to pretty much anything in the format. Lava Coils, Lightning Strikes, Ravenous Chupacabras, Vraska Golgari Queen. So there's definitely a risk here that you cast this, you exile your opponent's Crackling Drake, then they just kill it, they get back their Crackling Drake, they draw another card. So there is definitely some risk, and in our current format, especially with Golgari being so played and so powerful and being so good at killing random small creatures like Deputy of Detention, I'm not 100% sure how much it'll show up. It'll depend on what the metagame looks like. If Golgari is still the best deck, I'm not even sure you can really play this card, or at least depend on it, because a lot of times you're just going to end up getting blown out. But worst case, it does reset Wild Growth Walkers. It's great against tokens, so I wouldn't be surprised. Like, if you look back at the history of similar cards, they do tend to show up in Standard. The Detention Sphere clause of hitting all the permanents with the same name, really huge against tokens, and Selesnya could end up being a pretty good deck in the Standard format. So definitely a super sweet card, and it'll be interesting to see where it falls in the metagame. Next on our list, we have Biomancer's Familiar, which, oh man, this card is super spicy. So 2 mana in the Simic colors, you get a 2/2, and it is basically a training grounds. It gives the activated abilities on creatures you control -2 cost, can't go down below 1 mana, and the main reason I'm excited for this card is Training Grounds has all kinds of combo potential. There's some really sweet janky combos you can do with the card in the modern format. The problem is Training Grounds has always suffered from the Heartless Summoning problem, which is you build your deck around it. If you don't happen to draw your namesake card, the Training Grounds itself, then your deck just kind of does nothing. Having Biomancer's Familiar be copies 5, 6, 7, 8 of your Training Grounds is a really huge deal for a Training Grounds deck. And since we're mostly talking about Modern here, there's actually an upside to having a creature where you can find it with Collected Company, Court of Calling, which you can't do with Training Grounds. So that's mostly where I'm excited for this card. Yes, it is relevant for Standard with the Simic adapt mechanic, like your adapt costs are less, you can adapt even with counters, but what I really want to be doing with this card is playing it in Modern and going crazy with like Izzet Guildmage. If you have Izzet Guildmage and something like a Ritual, you can just kind of like go infinite with Desperate Ritual. Pilla, you can do all kinds of things by untapping it, going infinite that way. There's combos with Eldrazi Displacer, like if you can Eldrazi Displacer for a single mana because you have a Biomancer's Familiar out, you can just blink Eyeless Watcher, infinite number of times, infinite tokens, infinite mana. Even Nest Invader gives you infinite blink abilities. So there's tons of awesome things that Biomancer's Familiar enables in Modern. And being a creature, like I said, big upside in Modern compared to being an enchantment, just because you can find it so consistently. We see creature-based combo decks all the time in Modern that are so good at putting their pieces together, thanks to Collected Company, Core to Calling, Eldritch Evolution, so many good options to find it. So I'm going to be really excited to try to play this card in Modern. Is it going to break the format? Yeah, probably not, but I think there's a reasonable chance that this enables a new, at least semi-competitive combo deck in the Modern format alongside Training Grounds, and it is going to be super spectacular. As far as Standard is concerned, I mean, it does work well with Adapt. Probably more of a limited thing. I don't know. We'll have to see the rest of the Adapt cards. Is making Zagana 4 mana to Adapt rather than 6 mana to Adapt going to break it? Probably not. Is being able to adapt even with counters on it going to break it? I don't know. You're only getting a 2/2 for 2. So we'll have to see. Maybe there's some combo that develops in Standard. Definitely seems sweet for Limited, though. Awesome in Commander as well. So I'm super excited for this card, mostly for Modern, but super unique, super cool, and really awesome to see a redundant Training Grounds piece enter the format. We also got Sphinx of Foresight, which is a pretty unique card. So 4 mana, 4/4 blue flyer. If you have it in your opening hand, you can reveal it and scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. And then if you got it on the battlefield, not only do you got a fairly decent sized flyer, but you get to scry 1. So you get some nice card filtering going on. So this card, I mostly like it because it's reminiscent to some past mechanics that were pretty sweet. It's reminiscent of like the Chancellor's cycle, where we reveal it to do something at the start of your turn. Ley lines, somewhat one-shot ley lines. Even the forecast mechanic from original Ravnica, where you're revealing this from your hand for value. So I think it's a cool callback to some past mechanics. As far as actually seeing play in Standard, it doesn't seem to line up well with the format to me. I mean, a 4/4 flyer for 4 is not a bad card, but we're living in a world where you have Crackling Drakes, which is a huge flyer for 4 mana. Rekindling Phoenix, just Stonewall, Sphinx of Foresight forever, Lyra Dawnbringer the same way. So is this scrying on your upkeep, like how big of a deal is that? I guess it prevents mana screw, which is nice, and you can kind of like sculpt your opening hand a little bit, but still, I just don't know if the actual card on the battlefield is good enough for this to show up in competitive decks. If it has a shot, it might be the mono blue tempo deck, where it is a little bit silly compared to Tempest Shin, but on the battlefield, the scrying is a nice way to make sure you keep hitting your counter spells, and you can use stuff like Dive Down to protect it. So I think Sphinx of Foresight, it's a card that I like the flavor of it, and I think it can do some cool things, but I'm not sure it's actually going to be quite good enough in our Standard format, because we just have so many really powerful, really push flyers. It might be that Sphinx of Foresight is a cool Sphinx Tribal Commander card, but not really good enough to show up in Standard decks, because it's just a tiny step below the Lyra, Doom Whisperer, Rekindling Phoenixes of the world. Otherwise, we got confirmation of a bunch of cycles today, and these are cards that we knew were coming. So, Shocklands are returning, mana in Standard, going to be near perfect, the art looks super sweet. We also have Guildgates returning, 2 versions of each art. I'm only showing you 1 today, there's no sense in going through all of them. Nice backup lands. I don't know how much play they'll actually see, since we're going to have all the Shocklands now, so hopefully we don't have to play too many Guildgates. And then the Locket cycle, which is nice for Limited, never really cracked into Construct, but you never know, it could end up showing up sooner or later. And those have been our daily Ravnica Allegiance spoilers for today. So what do you think of these cards? How good is Deputy of Detention? Is that card going to show up in our Standard format? Is exiling non-land permanents enough of an upside to get around the drawback of getting blown out by removal? How about Hydroid Krasis? Is that just a sweet Simic flavor card, or can it actually show up in Standard, make some waves in the format? What about Biomancer's Familiar? What combos do you want to play with it in Modern? What could develop in Standard? All the returning cycles, the Shocklands, the Guildgates, the Lockets. What do you think about those? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.